a recipe for nettle soup. Well, not a recipe just as yet, because I'm going to work it out as I go along. So I've kind of got an idea. I made it last year and it was delicious, and I was looking back over the recipe that I wrote down and it doesn't make that much sense. So we'll do a proper recipe and work out the ratios of what we should be doing, but pretty straightforward. Nettles, they're about at the moment. They're just starting to shoot through. You just want the, I don't want to touch them because I haven't cooked them yet, so we'll just get that one. So you just want the tops of the nettles. Anything below that starts getting a little bit woody. And also you want the tops of the nettles because you want it to be away from the ground where the insects and rodents are, and the dogs go to the toilet. So they need to be like a foot high, the nettles, before you start picking them, and you just need to pick the tops. So like that. So that's the very, very, very top, but we can also get away with, pick one out. So that's the very top, that's the first row of leaves, and we can get away with the second row of leaves, depending on how young and new they are, before they start getting a little bit old. The nettle's going to be around from the start of April for a good couple of months, so they are abundant, and they are free, and they are delicious, and they make a soup which tastes like no other, and you will be surprised, if I'm honest. So we have got in here, there's about 100 grams worth of nettle tops which have been picked and washed. You need to wash them a couple of times. You need to wear rubber gloves. You don't want to sting yourself, and you also kind of want to get rid of any bugs and dirt and all those type of things. And then standard recipe as always, we've got onions, and the onions are going to be quite a lot of the bulk in this recipe. So it's 350 grams of onions, and then we're going to use some chili stock cubes as the seasoning and quite a lot of the flavouring as well. And then we're going to put in some whole milk, and we're going to put in some water as well. I'm not entirely sure how much water we're going to put in. Normally when I make soups, it's 350 grams worth of onions and half a litre of liquid and 125 millilitres of milk and 3 stock cubes, and then 500 grams of vegetables like carrots or peas or those type of things. But it's going to be a little bit different this recipe, so we might end up making about half a litre, whereas the normal standard recipe that I use normally makes about a litre. But obviously the more nettles you've got, the more soup you're going to make. So I will prep and chop the onions, and we'll cook them, and then we'll come back when we're at that stage. Normally I cook things all in one pan. We're going to do it in 2 pans today, because we need to sweat down the nettles separately from the rest of the soup, if that makes sense. But you'll see when we get there. So bit of prepping, bit of chopping, bit of prepping, and then we're back when we've got pans on the stove and we're ready to cook. Right, so I've had to think about things. I've cooked the onions, and I cooked them in 200 millilitres of water. A lot of the water's evaporated off, but the onions are now cooked and soft. Normally when I know a recipe, what I would do is I'd just add the nettle leaves to that pan, add the right amount of water and milk and stock cubes, boil it up, and then I'd have my ready soup. I can't really do that because I don't know how much volume and soup this is going to make, so I don't want to add too much water or milk at this stage. I want to be able to control the amount of liquid that I put in, and then we kind of get the right kind of flavour and right consistency for this soup. So this is a bit of a backwards way of working, but it actually shows you how I work out recipes and things. My philosophy is, it's dead easy to add a little bit more, very difficult to take it away. So if I was to add a litre, half a litre of water to that, and then add the nettles into it, cook the nettles in the water and the stock and the onions, there might be too much liquid in there, and then I would have mucked up the recipe. By doing it this way, I'll be able to nail the recipe bang on in one go. So there'll be no kind of having to go out tomorrow, pick some more nettles, peel some more onions, deal with all the food waste and the faffing around. I can work out the recipe as we kind of go, if that kind of makes sense. But once I've done the recipe, and the recipe is correct with the right kind of consistency and the right kind of liquids and the right amount of stock, then you can cook the onions, add more water, bring it up to the boil with the stock cubes in, then add the right amount of nettles to it, boil it till the nettles are tender, and then puree it, and then away you go. You'll have the perfect soup. I'm just kind of doing things in a different way. And also, if there's another video as well, which will be about cooking nettles and freezing them. So if you were to use frozen nettles that you defrosted, you'd be able to make the soup this method as kind of well. This would be the point where you add the frozen nettles to the liquid and pureeing it down. So it kind of it's a long ass way of going around things, but it's going to work out. So what we're going to do is we're going to cook the nettles in a little bit of water. In fact, what we'll do is I will cook the nettles in that water. So I know there was... No, I won't. No, I'm going to do it this way. No, it doesn't really matter. No, it won't really matter. No, it won't matter. I'm thinking on my feet. So, what we'll do is we'll cook the nettles this way around. So, I've got some tongs. So there was 200 millilitres water in there, so it has evaporated, so it's gone down to about 50 millilitres, which is fine for the amount of water that's going to steam this amount of nettle. Hopefully the pan's going to be enough. The nettles will shrink down once they start to cook and steam, and then we'll add water accordingly. Also save myself a bit of watering it this way. I don't know, is this really interesting, a kind of insight in how I work out recipes and things? Probably. I think I'd be interested to work out recipes, but this is how I work out recipes. The idea of having to go over a recipe time and time again, it's kind of not really what I want to do. I want to nail it in one. Just waiting for these to settle down a little bit. Losing a bit of the volume. It's a really nice soup, to say the least. It's very surprising. If you like things like spinach soup and watercress soup, it'll be right up your street with this soup. So once they've cooked down with the onions, I'll be able to see what kind of volume we've got, and then I can think about what kind of volume of water that I want to add, and what kind of volume we're going to get of the soup. The kettle's boiled, so I'll just make sure that it's fully boiled. So we'll turn it on again, and then we can see what kind of amount of boiling water that we're adding to it. Actually smells delicious. Just this as a vegetable would be really nice. So like just some onions or some red shallots, that type of thing, stewed like this in a pan with some butter or a bit of olive oil and a bit of salt and pepper would actually be delicious. I think people might turn their nose up at it, but we don't really want those people in our life, do we? So, it's wilted enough. They're quite tender, and the nettles, so we don't need to worry about them cooking them too much, and they will puree down quite easily. So, right, so we'll turn that down a little bit, measure out some water, and we'll see how much water we've got. So I'm going to add about 300 millilitres to start off with, and we'll see how we go from there. Well, I'm going to add it just to the pan. Yeah, we'll be okay with 300 millilitres. And we're going to bring it back up to the boil. Boiling quite quickly because we've added boiling water to it. So that's okay. I will probably need more water than that. But, as always, dead easy to add a bit more, very difficult to take away. So, it's certainly going to need 2 stock cubes. I'll look at that kind of volume, and I imagine that we're going to add a little bit more water, so it's certainly going to need 2 stock cubes. So we'll turn it off. The water's boiled, so we'll give it a pulse with the hand blender. See how we go. definitely going to need some more water. So, what should we say? We'll say another 200 millilitres of water, or 100 millilitres. No, we'll risk it at 2. So, another 200 millilitres of water. Maybe not, maybe just half that. We're going to add some milk. Yeah, that's 100. Now we'll need that. Like that. Give it a taste. That's nice as that. We'll go for the third stock cube and we'll add 125 millilitres of milk. We'll see what the consistency is like at that, and then we'll see if we need to add any more water. So, I mucked up there slightly out, it's 50. We'll just need to run. I've already made some milk out and then I've taken it off the scale, so I know there was 50 millilitres in there. So it wants 75 and that'll take us up to 125. Right. So whole milk as always, same price as normal all other milks, and therefore better because it's richer and nicer. And it's going to catch. So give it a puree, we'll see how it goes. Need some more water. So another 100 millilitres. We'll see how that goes. It's about the right kind of consistency. Maybe a little bit, even more. Maybe another 100 millilitres. I'm not making it out of this. I'll just re-watch the video. So another 100 millilitres. I think that's up to 600 millilitres of liquid. That's good consistency. That's how we want it, and we'll give it a taste. It's lovely. You'd never think that a stinging nettle could make something so delicious. Guaranteed. I mean, there's flavours from the stock cubes and the onion, but for something that you can go out and pick that hurts you if you don't pick it with gloves on, make something that delicious, that is really well worth utilising as an ingredient. Because it's green, you need to be quick with the cooking because you don't want to cook it for too long. So you couldn't make this and then reheat it because you're going to lose all that vibrant green colour and kind of lose some kind of flavour. So you need to make it and eat it straight away. But nettle soup is delicious. I'll rewatch the video and I'll work out the proper recipe. But I will say for the recipe, once I have the recipe down, what I would do would I'd cook the onions in a little bit of water just to get them soft, and then I'd add the right amount of water, which will be in the recipe, bring that up to a full boil, then I'd add the nettles in raw once they've been washed, cook them slightly for maybe a minute 30 seconds until they're tender enough that we can puree them, and then I puree it down with the stock cubes in and the milk, and then that would be the soup. That's the recipe. That's the method I would use if I knew the recipe before we started, but this is me working out the consistency and the right kind of volumes of water and milk and stock cubes and that type of thing. So it's kind of like an insight into how I work things out rather than actually a finished soup, but we get a finished soup from it, and I've just told you how to make the finished soup. So it's kind of how we kind of do it, but there we go. Delicious, really delicious. If I was to make watercress soup or a spinach soup, that's exactly the same method that I would use. Watercress kind of quite peppery, so you just need to be a little bit careful. But the same with rocket as well. You could make a rocket soup like that, or rocket the lettuce rather than a rocket that you go up on bonfire night or fireworks displays. But that's the same kind of ratios that I would use for those type of vegetables as well. But that is delicious. It's free. It's tasty. I'm sure it's a lot more nutrient dense than most things you could actually buy, and there's loads of it out there. I don't know why people talk about not being able to afford decent food. Everybody can afford that, and with a little bit of equipment and a little bit of know-how, you can certainly make it. But anyway, nettle soup. This video, I might make it again and do a more refined, easier version of how to make the soup, but I found that interesting. But there you go, nettle soup. We need to see how much it makes, so I need to measure it out. So pour it into the measuring jug. If you put it in a proper liquidizer, you get a much more refined than a soup. It's just that I don't really like using the proper liquidizer on the mixer because it just makes a mess, and you've got to get it out, and then you've got to wash everything and dry everything. Whereas I just kind of think everyone generally has got a stick blender. So if you can use a stick blender, it saves. All you have to do is wash up that rather than the whole of the liquidizer. But anyway, that makes one. Sorry, I've got nettle soup in my throat. That makes 1.2 litres. So for the cost of 3 stock cubes, a splash of milk, and 350 grams of onion, that's a really cheap soup. A really, really, really cheap, delicious soup. Go out and make it. If you don't, you're a fool.